What's up, my wizards? It's Dev from Mtg down there on the YouTube.com, and I was just doing spoiler videos at 3 o'clock in the morning last night, but when I woke up at 10 o'clock this morning, they had already released a bunch more spoilers. So I got 16 for you in this video, and for all I know, they'll release more before the videos even finished. So I'll keep reloading the page, but if there's more spoilers after that, I'll be back with another video tonight. So if you enjoyed the content, like the content, subscribe and hit the bell to make sure you get notifications for when I put new spoiler videos out. With that said, let's go. Well, right as I began to upload the video at 4 o'clock in the morning last night, this got spoiled. This is Aether Basker. He's 7 mana, that's 4 and 3 green for a 7/7 lizard with trample. And whenever Aether Basker enters the battlefield or attacks, you get an energy counter. And you can pay an energy to have Aether Basker get +1/+1 until end of turn. Typical big green creature, you know, some players love these things, but I'm not really sure how much play it actually ends up seeing, you know. In these energy decks, there's probably better options. There's Electrostatic Pummeler, and there's even like Architect of the Untamed, which might be on par at least with this because it costs so much less. And, you know, it's not a great reanimation target. If it had, like, haste or something, that'd be cool, you know. At least it's got the trample, though, and so you can swing in for a butt-ton when you first swing, so that's good. He swings for at least 9 when he swings in, even if you have no other energy-producing cards in the deck. And with something like, you know, alongside, like, Bristling Hydra, Attune with Aether, and the Elephant that we saw yesterday, like, you know, mono-green energy, something, it could be okay. But you'd have to have a bunch of rampers and stuff, maybe Cryptolith Rite or something, I'm not really sure. But, you know, in a Cryptolith Rite deck, this could go fairly well at the top of the curve. You just need to produce energy. So there's a lot of different deck construction issues with this thing. Not only its mana cost, but also, you know, energy decks, and you have to have some ramp and all this stuff. So I'm not really sure. I'm sure that the card will be tried, but for right now, it just looks like the big, giant green creature they have to print in every set. Now on to a hype card that will require a translation, and a few cards today will, so bear with me. This is Industrial Tower. It's a land, not a legendary land, just a land. You can tap it to add a colorless to your mana pool, or you can tap it and pay 1 life to add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool, but you can only activate this ability if you control an artifact. Incredible! But, incredible card. This set's looking really good. Like, this land could see play in Vintage. This land could see play in Legacy. It'll probably see play in Commander and EDH, obviously. It'll see play in Modern. It'll see play, like in Affinity, perhaps. It'll see play in Standard. Like, this is a ridiculous land that'll see play in nearly every single format that it's allowed to see play in. So you should pick up some copies of this, because this is a ridiculous card. It should be noted, by the way, that it also creates colorless mana for when you want to play your Eldrazi and stuff, so there's that about the thing. I've already pointed out it's not legendary. You can have a bunch of copies of it. You know, all you have to do is control a 0 or 1 mana artifact or something, and a clue, and you produce whatever mana you want, so that's good lord, like this is a fantastic card. I really could talk about the practical applications, and we're going to play this in Standard, in this deck, and that deck. We're going to play it in Standard in a lot of decks, and in Modern, and Commander, and Legacy, and blah. Like, this card is going to see all the play. So, I mean, I don't really have to babble about it too much, other than, hey, check out this amazing freaking card. Whew, gotta come down from that a little bit. This is Inspirational Monument right here. It's 3 mana for an artifact. Non-artifact spells you cast have Improvise. Well, the first thing I want to point out is that this is sort of a mana rock. You know, it can tap itself to reduce costs by generic mana, which is, by the way, an important thing to point out, because I've seen a lot of people say, like, oh, this is an Eldrazi, but this won't produce colorless mana. Improvise doesn't produce mana at all. It just reduces generic costs, so get Eldrazi out of your mind. The problem here, at least in my mind, is that you have to balance the deck a lot between, you know, artifacts and non-artifacts, and that's, I'm not really sure how I feel about that, but, you know, I just hate, like, split design. It's usually not great in and of itself. You have to build this deck so that it doesn't synergize with itself, and I'm not really sure about that, but this is sort of Cryptolith Rite-y in a way. You know, it could see some amount of play. I'm not really 100% on it, though, although, you know, the card is at least interesting design. Another expertise right here. This is Rishkar's expertise. It's 6 mana, that's 4 generic and 2 green. For a sorcery, draw cards equal to the greatest power among creatures you control. And then, you may cast a card with converted mana cost 5 or less from your hand without paying its mana cost. Okay, so 6 mana, that's an awful lot of mana. Like, 6 mana is a lot, but some cool things about this card. I like the way that it's ordered, in that, you know, you play a fat creature, then you draw like 4 cards off of it, and then you're able to play one of the cards you just drew for free. So that's great. And by the way, you know, I don't have to tell you this, but 5 mana, a card of 5 mana or less is ridiculous. Like, that's crazy. That's nearly any playable card in Standard next to like Emrakul and a couple of like, 5 or 6 mana things. So, and some 5 mana things like Bring to Light, you don't want to play that. But you play Goblin Dark Dwellers off of this, or really a lot of stuff. 5 mana accounts for all, like, most of the Gear Hulks. You play Verdurous Gear Hulk off of this, and that seems pretty stupid. So, whether you have the Gear Hulk in play first, draw like 8 cards off of this, that's entirely possible. Or you play the Gear Hulk off of the Expertise, it's just really good interaction there with Gear Hulk. So, I think the card is good, but will it see play? 6 mana is a lot. 6 mana is an awful lot for a spell. But again, you can play one of the cards that you drew, and that seems really good. But you already have to have a fat creature in play, so I don't know about that either. I think that the card is slightly awkward, but also gracefully designed, which is those are two weird things to go together. But I like the design and think that it could not be the best card ever. But then again, it could literally be the best card ever. So keep a lookout for this. I do think 6 mana is really, really steep. But the text on the card is ridiculous, obviously. Here's a card. This is Zygus Automaton right here. He's 2 mana for an artifact creature. He's a construct. He's a 0/3. You can pay 4 and a white to return another target creature you control to its owner's hand. Let's talk about a really expensive way to enable Revolt in Limited, and that's probably about it as far as this card's concerned. Really don't see too many reasons to stay talking about this for too long. Let's move on. Another translation incoming here. This is Aid from the Cowl. This is 5 mana. That's 3 and 2 green for an enchantment with Revolt. At the beginning of your end step, if a permanent you controlled left the battlefield this turn, you may reveal the top card of your library. If it is a permanent card, you may put it onto the battlefield. Otherwise, place the card on the bottom of your library. Okay, so there are people fairly hype about this card, but I don't know, man. Now, 5 mana is an awful lot for an enchantment that could possibly do nothing for the first turn that it comes into play, so I don't know about that. But you could construct your entire deck with nothing but permanents in it, some of which cost a ridiculous amount of mana, so that's pretty good. But then you have to have ways of making things leave the battlefield. Evolving Wilds is one thing, small creatures, things that sacrifice stuff. I mean, there's definitely ways you can set up for this, because this costs 5 mana. So at the top of your curve, maybe, but just putting an extra thing on the battlefield every turn could, a lot of times it's going to be a land, and then sometimes it could be an Ulamog or an Emrakul or something, but you're not actually casting the card, so that makes it worse with Eldrazi Titans too. It's I don't think that a 5 mana potential do nothing is going to be a heavily played card. Although the card could be broken through deck construction, so there's that too. But I'm just not really seeing this be truly impactful. Here's an interesting card right here. This is Renegade Map. It just costs 1, and it's an artifact. Renegade Map enters the battlefield tapped, and you can tap it and sacrifice it to search your library for a basic land, reveal it, put it into your hand, and then shuffle your library. Okay, so we've seen stuff like this before. It's not revolutionary, but in this format, it's actually got some pretty good implications that make it more than the sum of its parts, This is good in Delirium. Puts an artifact in the graveyard for very, very cheap. It's good for Improvise, you can leave it out, tap it to reduce costs and stuff. That's cool. I just like that this is a cheap artifact in a set, or a block, really, where artifacts matter. And that's really good. It's easy to put in the graveyard. It works with Revolt, by the way, in Limited and in Standard as well. So I think that this is unassuming at first, but the more you think about it, it's got a lot of applications in the current Standard and could actually see some play. Here's Countless Gears Renegade. I've liked a lot of the names in this set. I don't know about old CGR here. This is 2 mana, that's 1 and a white for a 2/2 Dwarf Artificer with Revolt. When Countless Gears Renegade enters the battlefield, if a permanent you controlled left the battlefield this turn, you get a Servo. It's a 1/1 artifact creature token. Okay, so in Limited, yeah, this seems pretty good. You end up getting like 3 power split among 2 guys for just the 2 mana. That's not bad. And in Standard, this could go in some budget builds, definitely. Makes the board wider. That's always good. It puts a Servo out. That's a relevant creature type nowadays. So all that seems good. And it's a common, by the way, so it's playable in Pauper, which might actually be really important in like some decks. Maybe like the Koldatha deck or something. But I'm not really sure about that. But in Pauper, it's playable all day, so that's cool. Just a really high power level for a common is all I'm saying. So I like the card. I do like the card. We'll just have to wait and see. Again, I've been working on like green-white servos for a while, and red-white servos. I've been working on a servo deck for a minute here. And this slots directly in, so I'm going to try it out. It looks good. Here's Aether Geode Miner right here. It's 2 mana, that's 1 and a white for a 3/1 Dwarf Scout. With whenever Aether Geode Miner attacks, you get 2 energy. And you can pay 2 energy and exile Aether Geode Miner, then return it to the battlefield under its owner's control. Now this is solid. This is solid. 2 mana, 3/1 is fair stats, decent stats right there. And this is gonna be an easy way to trigger Revolt. That's one thing. Easy, super easy way to trigger Revolt. And also, if it attacks, like, you can always remove it from combat if it gets in trouble. So that's cool, you know. You go to instant speed remove it or something, just say, like, no. Flicker it or something. So that's, you know, well, that seems pretty cool. It'd be nice if it gave you energy when it entered the battlefield, but that would be a little broken considering you could just flicker it. There's that, too. But I do think that this could have some actual reasons to be played in Standard, you know. But will it actually make it? It has to find a home, you know. If there's like a green-white Revolt deck or something, maybe. But again, it's got to find a home. But in Limited, you play this a lot, you know. As soon as you get it, this really enables the Revolt deck. And not only that, the reason that it could see play in Standard is that it protects itself so well, at least when it's attacking. Or if you have 2 energy out, you know, just whenever. It doesn't have to attack and get the 2 energy. If you have 2 energy, you can do it whenever you want. So, card looks good in that it protects itself, but we'll have to wait and see if that's enough. Here's another good 2-drop, actually. This is Glint-sleeve Siphoner right here. He's 2 mana, 1 and a black, for a 2/1 human rogue with Menace. Good stats already. When Glint-sleeve Siphoner enters the battlefield or attacks, you get an energy counter. And at the beginning of your upkeep, you may pay 2 energy. If you do, you draw a card and you lose a life. So a couple of sets ago, we had Asylum Visitor, and everyone was like, hey, Bob, you're back. You know, Dark Confidant, here you are. And that didn't pan out. This may, who knows, you know, they've done this before. Print a creature that looks a little bit like Bob, and we all start freaking out. But will this be a real thing? It's entirely possible. First of all, 2 mana for a 2/1 with Menace. I've already mentioned this. That's good stats right there. That's a relevant evasive ability on a 2-drop. That's not bad at all. It's a bear, you know, 2 mana, 2 power. That's at least playable. That's good. And it has an enter the battlefield trigger and an attacks trigger that gives you energy. All that's good. Like everything so far, that'll work well with Demon of Dark Schemes. That'll work well with Die Young, so that's good too. And it allows you to draw cards. So like so much stuff packed onto this card too with decent stats. I think that it's all day playable. It just again has to find a home. And people are talking about green-black artifacts maybe, or like a green or a black energy deck. There's definitely some ideas for it, but it has to find a real competitive home. But in a way, I kind of hope it doesn't keep the price down, because this is a premium card. It's playable in a lot of different budget builds. Hopefully it doesn't get to, you know, $5 so that we can continue playing it in those budget builds, because it looks like it's made for those, but this could have real serious competitive potential if we can find a way. Bobs don't fool me anymore. New Bobs do not fool me anymore. I know that this looks really good and all, but these are the kind of cards that you really have to wait and see how much play they actually get before you judge them, because it looks good and all. It does an awful lot of stuff, has a relevant evasive ability, has good stats, all that, but I will not be fooled again. That's all I'm going to say. So, looks incredible, but temper your ambition on that one. I just said temper your ambitions, but I'm going to gush about this card for a second. This is Mechanized Production right here. It's 4 mana, that's 2, and 2 blue for an aura that enchants an artifact you control. At the beginning of your upkeep, create a token that's a copy of the enchanted artifact. Then, if you control 8 or more artifacts with the same name as one another, you win the game. Could this actually be a viable piece of, you know, alternate win condition here? Like, maybe it's entirely possible, actually. First thing I want to point out that a lot of people have already pointed out is that you don't have to have 8 different copies of the artifact that's enchanted. You just have to have 8 different copies of an artifact with the same name. So even if you didn't enchant a clue or something, or a servo, then as long as you have 8 clues or 8 servos out, you win the game. You win the game. And yes, tokens have names. I've heard a couple of people ask that question. Tokens do in fact names. That's why like Declaration in Stone works the way that it does. So tokens have names. If you have 8 servos, 8 clues, you win the game. Totally viable. Like I've seen, and a lot of people have seen decks that make, you know, 8 to 10 clues like nothing. No problem. So this actually looks fairly decent to me. And let's not forget, by the way, that this will create a copy that gets an enter the battlefield trigger every single turn, so you can put it on like a Gear Hulk. Let's say you put it on like a Noxious Gear Hulk or something. You just bust a creature every single turn. That looks good too. So, you know, and that'll keep the game going on long enough that you might actually get 8 Noxious Gear Hulks out. So, all of that is awesome. You could also create a white Gear Hulk every turn and keep this thing out. And just blow up the board every single turn and have a Gear Hulk in this. So that also seems good. So yeah, like the card. Gonna definitely try a few different things with this and see where it takes us. In the home stretch here, this is Reverse Engineer. It's 5 mana. That's 3 and 2 blue for a sorcery with Improvise. And you draw 3 cards. Now this is more like it right here. Draw 3 cards for just 2 blue mana. Seems like a really crazy deal to me. I mean, it's not Thoughtcast. Not quite Thoughtcast, but at least reminds me of Thoughtcast. I like this card. I could actually see this seeing a fair amount of play. Drawing 3 cards is always great, even for 5, by the way. If, you know, drawing 3 cards for 5 is okay. If you can just like improvise once or twice, drawing 3 cards for 3 or 4 mana is still fine too. But if you can just get this for 2 mana, you have done well. I hate that it's a sorcery. Really, really hate that it's a sorcery. So there's that going on. But same difference in a control deck. You know, you can still have counter magic mana up. You know, if you just pay 2 for this. So, like it a lot. Think that it could actually see 1 or 2 of play in a few different decks, like Metallurgic Summonings. There's a few different things. The blue-black artifacts deck with Tezzeret, so yeah, like the card. Here's a legend. We finally get to see Yahenni. This is Yahenni, Undying Partisan right here. It's 3 mana. That's 2 and a black for a 2/2 legendary Aetherborn Vampire. That's an awesome creature type. With haste, by the way. And whenever a creature an opponent controls dies, you put a +1/+1 counter on Yahenni, Undying Partisan. And then sacrifice another creature, Yahenni gains indestructible until end of turn. Okay, a lot of good stuff about this card. I wasn't quite impressed at first read, but the more you think about it, better the card becomes. First of all, this is a free sacrifice outlet at the same cost as Nantuko Husk, so it kind of reminds me of that a little bit. But instead of, you know, just swinging in for a lot or becoming bigger, this protects itself for the rest of the turn. Really good, just against everything except, like, Grasp of Darkness. And Dead Weight, I guess, but, you know, that's beside the point. Actually, it's right on the point, but who cares? Who cares is my point. In any case, this will be able to save itself from a lot of removal and enable sacrifice tricks. It'll be good with Revolt, activates Revolt, so that's pretty cool too. And I will say that I do and do not like the way this interacts with Yahenni's expertise, which is kind of awkward. If you've got this out, it doesn't survive its own expertise unless you're able to put a couple of counters on it before you actually play the expertise. But you can play expertise into this, which that kind of seems pretty good right there. So I like that about the card. I do think that it is definitely going to see some amount of play. It's sort of a nombo with Kalitas, which is next to it on the curve, because when the creatures die, Kalitas will exile them, and this won't get the +1/+1 counter. So that kind of sucks, because you want to play both of them in the same deck. And this is a vampire, so it could work with Kalitas. That's just something we'll have to work out individually. You might not even want the +1/+1 counters that much. You might just want to have a sack outlet. You know, that's free. So there's that. Having a free sack outlet's going to be really, really good to have that again. So I think that there's a lot of good things about the card, and it's a thinker as far as deck construction. There's a lot of things you have to wrap your head around when thinking, like, what do we put this in? So I like the card, but this is going to require a fair amount of thought before we figure out exactly what its home is. That said, we still have like Zulaport Cutthroat in the format, so it shouldn't be too hard to figure out. Here's Tezzeret's Touch right here. This is 3 mana. That's 1, a blue, and a black for an enchantment, an aura, that enchants only artifacts. Enchanted Artifact is a creature with base power and toughness 5/5 in addition to its other types. When Enchanted Artifact is put into a graveyard, return that card to its owner's hand. Okay, so we didn't see Ensoul Artifact, but we did see this. It just costs 1 more mana than Ensoul. You add a black to it, and for that black, you get a pseudo sort of raised dead. You know, whenever it does die, it comes right back. So that's cool. We just saw Ornithopter, so, you know, turn 3, 5/5 flyer. That seems pretty good right there. But something so akin to Ensoul Artifact that also lets you get the creature right back seems definitely playable to me, especially with things like Ornithopter and Bonesaw and Cathar's Shield in the format. Definitely want to try this thing out. And here's the last card that's been spoiled, at least during the recording of this video. This is Rogue Refiner right here. He's 1, a green, and a blue, a Simic card. Yay. He's a human rogue, and he's a 3/2. When Rogue Refiner enters the battlefield, you draw a card, and you get 2 energy counters. Could you imagine if Galactic Company was still in the format? Probably play this. But it looks like a solid card to me. It's definitely going to see all of the limited play like ever, and it could see some play in Constructed too, you know. Just 3 mana for a 3-power guy that draws you a card and gives you 2 energy, 2 enter the battlefield triggers. That is really, really good. Actually, it's not 2 separate triggers, it's 1 trigger. But anyway, this looks awesome, and like you could put this in a Bant deck, you know. We've got a bunch of stuff, like Eldrazi Displacer goes well with this. Cloud Blazer in the same deck as this looks good. We've got Panharmonicon. So that's also really, really good. I like to see a Simic card that's doing work. That's cool, you know. So I think the card's awesome, and I'm not really sure all of the standard applications that the card might have, but when you put draw a card on a 3-power creature for just 3 mana, and you just, here, have some energy too, like, that's pretty good, you know. Will Marvel play this card? I'm not sure. Like the Teamer Aetherworks deck. You know, I'm not really sure about that, but maybe it's entirely possible. Drawing a card is something they want to do, and putting a body on the field to block is something they also want to do, because those decks, you know, decks are going to try and go really, really fast and go up under Aetherworks Marvel is what it's looking like. It's what it's looking like. That's what you have to do right now, at least. Either that or out-control them, you know, disallow Ceremonious Rejection, stuff like that will be important against Aetherworks too, but I'm babbling at this point. There are going to be a bunch of aggro decks that try to go up under Aetherworks Marvel. And so this may help. You know, you get the 2 energy for Marvel. You get to draw a card, which will help you find the pieces that you need in that combo deck. And you get a relevant creature on the battlefield that will trade with something important. So maybe Teamer Marvel could play this, or even just Simic Marvel. So I think the card definitely could be a thing. So watch out for it. I mean, stuff like this, Selkie and Coiling Oracle, things that remind me of this, you know, they always see a lot of play and they're fan favorites, so I love the card. Okay, so got all the way to the end of editing that video and they released another card, so I wanted to jump back in here and talk about this card real quick. Sorry, by the way, if the audio is a little bit lower on this one. I actually put my microphone over here with me so that maybe I can get the audio a little bit louder here. But anyway, one more card, what could it possibly be? Well, it's Renegade Rallier. As a matter of fact, it's 3 mana. That's 1, a green, and a white for a 3/2 human warrior with Revolt. When Renegade Rallier enters the battlefield, if a permanent you controlled left the battlefield this turn, return target permanent card with converted mana cost 2 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. Alright, so this is an uncommon. This is an uncommon. It could easily be a rare. Couple of things here. I like that in Modern, it gives you fetches back. That's cool, although it may be like a turn too slow for that format. And if it doesn't have Revolt, you know, when it comes out, then that's kind of a problem. It's just like a vanilla 3/2, and you really don't want that. You have to make it work for it to be worth it at all. So that is also kind of a stumbling block, but other than that, I do like that it can, like, if something died that turn and that's what enables its Revolt, then when it comes into play, you can just get that creature back from the graveyard and put it right back into play. That's cool. This looks like it might be okay in a Green-White Humans deck. I just built a Green-White Humans deck for the channel, actually. And this could go pretty well in it, because it pretty much gets, like, almost any creature in the entire deck back in the graveyard. That's cool. And imagine if this puts, like, a Thalia's Lieutenant into play. That's awesome. Get all your creatures, or all your humans, +1/+1 counter, so that would be a really relevant ETB. As a matter of fact, that's what you want to be looking for with this, is creatures with relevant ETB triggers. Even if it's just like Thraben Inspector, that could be good value. So I think the card is pretty darn good, and will definitely see play in budget builds and stuff. But whether or not it sees play in anything better than that will definitely depend on the available targets. All right, I think I'm safe to cut it for the time being. I think that's all I've got for right now. But if Wizards releases more cards later on the night, I will put out another video for you. So make sure you hit the bell next to the subscription thing down there so that you'll get a notification when I put that video out. Spoiler season is an important time to make sure you click the bell, is all I'm saying. So I will see you guys a little bit later on tonight, very likely, and if not, at some point tomorrow afternoon. I'm Deb from SBMTG. Thanks for watching, my wizards.